Is your fantasy world more outdated and stagnant than actual medieval history? I'm going to let you in on a secret. In the real, actual medieval world, and even in ancient societies, they had slang, fashion trends, and cultural upheaval. They even had naughty jokes, like a lot of them. They weren't frozen in time. So why do so many fantasy worlds seem stuck in a perpetually idealized past? I'm Janet from World Anvil, a world building specialist, and we're going to explore how to create fantasy cultures that actually feel alive. Because like you, cultures should live, breathe, and grow over time. Picture two medieval merchants meeting at a crossroads. In most fantasy stories, they'd speak in flowery formal language about thee and thou. But historically, they'd probably be swapping dirty jokes and complaining about taxes. Don't believe me? Watch almost any Shakespeare play. They're rife with ribald humour and everyday gripes. And what about the clay tablet from the city of called The Complaint Tablet of Nasir? It's essentially a scathing Yelp review of a copper merchant from about 1750 BCE. It's tempting to imagine the past as rarefied, a more sophisticated and genteel time. But real societies are messy. They're full of people pushing boundaries, questioning traditions, breaking taboos, and finding new ways to express themselves. The past wasn't pristine. It was chaotic, colourful, and constantly changing, and your fantasy world building should be too. Why not share your own favourite social upheaval, either real or fictional, in the comments? And even more, there's a habit among world builders to create cultural and technological stagnancy. Centuries where nothing changes or developed. But if you think about it, your average medievalish peasant saw more technological and social change in one lifetime than most fantasy worlds see in 1,000 years. The Black Death completely transformed European social structures. Fashion and food trends were constantly changing and spread like wildfire across trade routes. The printing press revolutionized society, the same way that the internet changed ours. And remember, our world didn't even have magic to accelerate all of this. As a world builder, you need to track these moments of change and innovation, and you can use the timelines feature on World Anvil. It's a great way to show parallel and consecutive changes across technology, religion, culture, and more. And with Chronicles, you can even show how they spread across the world on a map, tracking how your fantasy cultures evolve, from major social movements to changing slang and fashion trends. In school classes, we're taught that the most important things in history are wars and coronations. But actually for world builders, tracking cultural movements, art styles, and social revolutions can have as much, or even more, impact on your world setting. It's a great way to show how one generation's radical idea becomes the next generation's tradition. I have a question for you. Do you know why you're making the choices you make in world building? Because, let's be honest, a lot of fantasy worlds are just copying things that copied Tolkien, who himself drew inspiration from medieval sources that copied even old sources. That's a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. But here's the thing. This kind of copying can actually push stories further from a sense of authenticity. Each iteration loses a little fidelity, till the final product is a muddled mess that represents, well, kind of nothing. And certainly the core meaning gets lost in all those copies, until you don't know why you're making the choices you're making. So how do you fix that? Well, you start fresh and allow cultures in your setting to influence each other and grow over time. Your elves don't have to be ethereal forest dwellers, and they don't have to hate your dwarves, who, by the way, do not have to be Scottish miners. Your fantasy cultures can draw inspiration from any era, from any society, or from something completely new. And your cultures shouldn't exist in isolation from one another. I'm not saying that all of your cultures should syncretize into one big blobo culture, although they totally could, especially if you want to comment on modern society and globalization. But your cultures should react to one another. That makes your setting deep and rich with connection and conflict. Also, rejecting something is totally a way of being influenced by it. Maybe your cultures are becoming increasingly polarized. Hard to imagine how that could happen in real life. For example, if your dwarves embrace a primitive, simple life, maybe their sworn enemies become obsessed with advancing technology through magic. The key here is understanding that cultures are living things. They grow, they change, and they absorb influences from their neighbours. A culture that doesn't change is a culture that's stagnating, and usually dying. And those changes can be a rich source of drama and conflict in your world, which is something that any good storyteller, and I'm sure you're a good storyteller, should embrace wholeheartedly. So consider this your permission slip to let your fantasy world Grow up. Let your characters use casual language. Let them question old traditions. Let them push their societies forward. Do you want knights with union strikes? Do it. Fantasy merchants with marketing campaigns? Why not? Labour-saving technology that brings your peasants more free time? Bring it on! A wizard social media influencer? Why the heck not? Remember, fantasy doesn't mean historical. It means set your imagination free. If you want to make your fantasy world feel more alive through language, check out our video on conslangs. They're a quick and easy way to create a fictional language and develop casual slang and everyday speech for your evolving fantasy cultures. Now grab your hammer and go world build.